Hey, I'm Anderson Cooper alongside Aaron Burnett. We want to welcome you here, all our viewers here in the U.S. and around the world. It is official. CNN projects that Joe Biden will be the 46th president of the United States, defeating incumbent President Donald J. Trump after more than 4 days of vote counting, which still is not finished, and months of a bitter and contentious campaign. President-elect Biden's victory is clinched thanks to the state of Pennsylvania, where he was born.
Anderson, a state that he was confident from very early on would turn in his favor, as indeed it has. The third time proving to be the charm for Biden. He did come up short in his prior two presidential bids, never gave up. And here he is, the president-elect. He'll be the oldest person ever to hold the nation's highest office. He will be 78 when he's sworn in. Also making history is his running mate, Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris, of course, the first woman and the first person of color to serve as vice president, making history today, Anderson.
Yeah, crowds have been pouring into the streets in celebration across the country today. You're looking at the scene right there in San Francisco as voters delivered a decisive repudiation of President Trump. Massive voter turnout for President-elect Biden and also for President Trump. His supporters came out, and President Trump did a very effective job in the final weeks of the campaign, mobilizing his voters in a number of rural areas, but it wasn't enough. In the final analysis. That's the scene in Washington, D.C. What's significant about that's actually the church where President Trump famously cleared protesters from and marched to that church to pose in front of it with a Bible. That church now a very different scene there today as thousands of people in Washington, D.C. Began to gather outside the White House in celebration of the defeat of President Trump, and that crowd only seems to have grown over the last few hours. In just a few hours, President-elect Biden will deliver a victory speech at 8 p.m. East Coast time in the United States. President Trump, for his part, shows no sign of admitting defeat, has not reached out to Biden, even as leaders worldwide have delivered messages of congratulations to the president-elect. I want to go to CNN's Jeff Zeleny, who is at the Biden headquarters in Wilmington, Delaware. So we expect Biden to address the nation tonight. What do you know about it?
Anderson, we do. President-elect Joe Biden will address the nation tonight right here in Wilmington at about 8 p.m. Eastern time. I'm told that speech has largely been written for several days. Of course, this was the speech he hoped to deliver on Tuesday night, on Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night. Now, finally, tonight, he will be able to do it. But he has been making last-minute adjustments to it. But I'm told that the overall theme is going to be one we've heard from him for several days, one of unifying, one of reaching out to Americans who did not vote for him as well as those who did. He will be talking about also the central challenge facing this country, coronavirus, and why it is time to come together. But we do have some words from the former vice president in a statement he released just a short time after he was projected the winner. Let's take a look at those words together. He says this. He said, "I am honored and humbled by the trust the American people have placed in me and Vice President-elect Harris. In the face of unprecedented obstacles, a record number of Americans voted, proving once again that democracy beats deep in the heart of America. With the campaign over, it's time to put the anger and the harsh rhetoric behind us and come together as a nation. It's time for America to unite," he says, "and to heal. We are the United States of America, and there's nothing we can't do if we do it together." So those themes will be the central framework of his message here this evening. Also on stage, of course, his running mate, Senator Kamala Harris, who's going to make history in her own right as the first woman to be vice president of the United States, the first woman of color as well. She, of course, started this campaign at the very beginning as a competitor of his. They had several interesting moments, but for the last several months has been his partner in this campaign and will be tonight on stage as well. I am told that the former vice president, now president-elect, has spent several hours with his family at his home here in Wilmington, talking to old friends and allies, Democratic leaders on the phone as well. So clearly getting ready for what is the biggest speech tonight that really sets off the tone for his transition and, of course, his first term. Anderson.
Jeff Zeleny. Jeff, thanks very much. Appreciate it. I want to go straight to the White House now and CNN's Caitlin Collins. So, Caitlin, we know the president was on the golf course earlier today when or was on his way when the call was made by CNN and then other news organizations as well. When also, as he was on the golf course, when obviously that news was conveyed to the entire world that he was going to be a one-term president. What have what are you hearing from the White House, from people close to him?
Well, it's been incredibly quiet. A lot of White House aides, we reported yesterday, the reality had set in for them that the president was not going to be reelected likely. And so they knew it was happening, but it wasn't clear that the president had realized what was going on and that he was not going to be reelected. And of course, it still doesn't if you look at his Twitter feed today claiming that he won the election when obviously he hadn't. And so you're right. When he left the White House today, the call had not been made by CNN yet that Joe Biden was going to win the presidency. So there was no crowd like there is now outside the White House. But when he returned, and for those who don't know, the president takes a motorcade to get to his golf course outside of Virginia. And it actually took a little bit longer for him to get back, given that they had to clear the streets of the people who are celebrating Joe Biden's win. And obviously a lot of them are Biden supporters. And of course, a lot of them have Biden flags, Biden signs. And that's what the president saw as he made his way back to the White House. And he waved to reporters, but he went inside Anderson. He did not make any comments. And the White House just called a lid, meaning we do not expect to hear from the president, at least not in person tonight. And of course, he has continued to refuse to concede this election to Joe Biden. He hasn't spoken with Joe Biden. He hasn't made any calls to him. He certainly hasn't invited him to the White House, as you traditionally see, as Barack Obama did when Donald Trump won the presidency. They came into the White House and had a meeting in November, something that you often see President Trump reference. And so the president is continuing with his grievances to claim that he won this election, even though he didn't. And as his evidence or his campaign is continuing to push without evidence that this election was stolen from him. And so that is something that they're continuing to pursue. How long they can keep that up is another question, because of course a transition does have to take place. They do have to do basics like transition things, like when it comes to the coronavirus task force, and how that will all proceed we'll find out in the coming days. But as the president is refusing to acknowledge Joe Biden's win, he is pretty much the only one, because you are seeing some Republicans be quiet, but we are seeing former Republican presidents like George W. Bush acknowledge it. Mitt Romney, a former presidential candidate who is a Republican, of course. And so the question is, it seems like it's only a matter of time before the president himself, maybe he doesn't do so jubilantly, but he is going to have to acknowledge the fact that he's not going to be president again after he finishes up the next 70 days or so in office.
Caitlin, it's a kind of a remarkable image that you tell us about, that President Trump, as he's returning from a golf course after learning that he's going to be a one-term president, that he has lost this election, an election in which there are winners and losers, and he has lost this one, basically being having difficulty getting through because of the crowds who were there celebrating his loss. I mean, you know, you sort of want to be a fly on the wall of the limousine,
yeah,
wondering what that is like for any. I mean, one can imagine what that is like.
And also keep in mind, his chief of staff, a top aide who's been with him pretty much every day this week, is not, because he's isolating at home now that he has coronavirus. So the president, actually, there's still a question of who exactly it was the president played golf with today, because often you see some celebrities with him. We did not see that in the videos that our team got of the president actually on the golf course as this announcement was made. And then he came back here, and you noted that church, of course, that is right here outside of the White House by Lafayette Square, how that was also the scene of where the president came and took his picture as they forcefully cleared out peaceful protesters. I remember that because I was standing right where I am now on that day when that happened amid those George Floyd police brutality protests. But Anderson, that's also the church that the president went to the day he was inaugurated in January of 2017 when he was first a newcomer here in Washington. So that church has actually played a pretty significant role in Donald Trump's time in office, from the day he was inaugurated to one of the most critical moments of his presidency that will be scrutinized for decades to come, to now it is where people have gathered by the thousands to celebrate the fact that he is not going to be president and that Joe Biden is.
Just to be clear, though, he wasn't going to that church every Sunday.
No, he certainly wasn't. It's a church that he's gone to on some special occasions. Easter at times, though mostly he's down in Mar-a-Lago. It is not somewhere where he regularly goes to church. He went there in May, of course, during that moment as they cleared the protesters out. And then now today it is the scene of these protests, or excuse me, these celebrations after being the scene of the protest.
Yeah, obviously we'll see what the president chooses to do, how he chooses to behave moving forward, whether he does concede and reaches out to Joe Biden as is tradition. Caitlin Collins, thanks very much.